Where Evil Lives, the Book of Boss Battles from MCDM. MCDM, right? MCDM, yeah, because it's like Matt Colville Dungeon Master. I don't know what those initials actually stand for, but MCDM. Now, when I saw that they were releasing a boss battle book, I didn't know exactly what that meant. I was like, is this a book just with boss battles, probably from Flea Mortals? And that's pretty much exactly what this is. I read their foreword, which basically, this is the follow-up to part 2. They had a bunch of cool ideas, but they couldn't fit all of it into their monster book, Flea Mortals, so they created a separate book for the boss battles. When I saw that, I was like, do you have to already have Flea Mortals in order to be able to use Where Evil Lives? And in the foreword, they answer that pretty quickly. No, you don't have to reference Flea Mortals at all. So you can just buy it as a standalone book. It has a lot of the bosses from Flea Mortals with their lairs and all this extra stuff added. It's not all of the bosses from Flea Mortals. I'll have a list of each of the bosses and the levels that it's balanced for. And it's a pretty good spread. I was happy when I saw this and saw how many bosses were going to be in here and how many different levels. Now, each of them follow a very similar format, so we'll pull up one as an example of what you're going to be getting. This one I've already ran before, and it went pretty well. It gives a little bit of lore, it gives some adventure hook ideas, which work pretty well for you to be able to just plug it into your campaign and use it. It gives some general info on the lair, and then we move down into the lair. For this one, this is the map that you get, which is cool because each of them come with a map, but I do have some complaints as an online player, and that is that these maps don't work very well for VTTs. First off, they have like the area designator, so like the O1, the O2 on this map, for example, because they don't have a DM version and a player version, and to use their map anyway, you just have to copy the image from the PDF, which is not as high of a resolution image as you would typically use for a VTT. Don't get me wrong, it can work, but as the players zoom in and they're moving their tokens, it's going to look a little bit pixelated and it's not going to be the greatest. So when I ran this one, I used Dungeon Alchemist and just created my own map using this as a reference, which works out all right for me anyway because it makes it really easy to change certain details, which I like to do whenever I plug any pre-written adventure into my campaign or my world. So just keep that in mind, even though they come with maps, if you're running it on Foundry, for example, like I do, you're not going to be able to just take these maps and plug them straight into your Foundry and use them like that. Or at least it's not the smoothest process if you do. But moving through, as you can see, they have a description for each of the rooms, stuff that you're likely to find in there. And it's their lair. It gives the description of their lair as well as all of the minions that the party should encounter if you were to run this as a one-shot and they go through some of the different fights that they can encounter and all of that fun stuff. All of the monsters and the minions are from the Flea Mortals book. So you get a pretty good amount of monsters from Flea Mortals that are plugged into this just because they use them in the different lairs. So on just this one adventure, here's all the different monsters from the Flea Mortals book that you're getting in this book. And included in that, you'll notice that there is this companion. So naturally, if you're wondering, do they give a lot of the different rules for how to handle minions, how to handle companions, and some of the different stuff they do with their monsters? Yep, that's in the book. In the first chapter, they go through a lot of that stuff just like they did in Flea Mortals. Well, I shouldn't say just like they did. They don't go into as much detail on certain things, and not everything from Flea Mortals is in this book. For example, their encounter builder and improved way on using CR is not in this book, which makes sense because they're building all of the encounters for you. It doesn't really need to be in this book. But you get a lot of the rules and information in this book, like minions, and I really like their minion rules. I've been using their minions a lot since I read Flea Mortals, and so you get that with this book as well. So not only do you get a lot of the monsters and some of the rules that go along with those monsters, each of the bosses I've ran so far have all come with 2 magic items. I don't know if that's true across the board, but all the ones that I have ran have had 2 magic items, so I would assume so. One of the ones from this one is the Silence, which was pretty fun. I'll have it up on the screen so that you can read what it does, and there's already been a few little shenanigans with it, but again, nothing game-breaking with these items. All right, so that's one of the adventures, and for this one specifically that I was showing, it was infiltrating a base. When my players went through, it was more social and role-playing as they talked their way in, and then got down into the last boss fight, but there weren't really any traps or puzzles for the party to figure out. It was more roleplay. Now, if they didn't want to roleplay, this one would have just been a combat-heavy one, but that's not the case for all of them. They do mix it up pretty well. The one that I'm prepping right now is pretty puzzle-heavy. Obviously, still combat involved, but it's pretty puzzle-heavy. There's some that involve some more traps, so they do mix it up depending on what the monster is or the setting, which I like that touch. Now, if you haven't purchased any of them and you're looking at buying one, you might be asking which one should you buy, because you definitely shouldn't buy both of them. There's a lot of the same information you would be paying for twice. A lot of the bosses, the rules on minions, anyway, there's a lot of crossover information. So with Flea Mortals, what you're getting that isn't in Where Evil Lies, I always want to say Where Evil Lies, excuse me, Where Evil Lives. So with Flea Mortals, what you're getting is some different rules on balancing encounters. I do actually really like the way they use CR in Flea Mortals. I think that is a much more accurate way to use CR. The villain parties, I've used a couple of them. I really like the villain parties that are in there. And there are more monsters in Flea Mortals, and they're formatted or laid out in a way that makes them much easier to go find when you need to plug something into your campaign. Now, with Where Evil Lives, what you're getting are the maps. Now, I did say that you probably don't want to copy and paste the map into your VTT, but it does not take very long to make a map when you already have a template that you're going off of. The next is you already have built layers and adventures with a bit of story to go along with the boss, and the encounters are already built and balanced. Then that's about it. That's all you're really getting from Where Evil Lives. But because you still get a lot of those monsters from Flea Mortals and the bosses from Flea Mortals, and they're put together in a usable way where they do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, that's the one I would buy. Honestly, if I was just buying one, it would be Where Evil Lives. I would buy both if they gave a discount. So I'll put the prices on the screen. If they gave a discount for the other one, if you already had one, or at least the PDF, if they're like, yeah, if you already have Flea Mortals, then you can get the PDF for Where Evil Lives for like $10. I would pay $10 for it. I'd probably pay $15 for it. I wouldn't pay anything more, and I believe it's $30, but I don't remember for sure off the top of my head right now. Now, a caveat on that, if Flea Mortals came with a Foundry module that already had all of the monsters pre-built, you best believe that is the one I would be buying.
So editing Josh here, apparently they actually do have Flea Mortals for a VTT, but it's only Fantasy Grounds, so that doesn't really help most people, as I think Fantasy Grounds is solidly third place in the most used VTTs. But anyway, if you use Fantasy Ground, apparently they do have it for Fantasy Grounds.
Cobalt Press does this with their like Creature Codex, Tome of Beasts, where you can buy a module that already has their monsters. Unfortunately, one of the things that just makes me not want to use just monsters from Flea Mortals as much is that I don't like having to recreate them in Foundry. So from Flea Mortals, I mostly just use bosses, just because it's just, you know. Don't get me wrong, you still have to recreate them with Where Evil Lives, but a lot of the heavy lifting for creating the adventure has already been taken off your hands, so prepping is really just creating the map, creating the monsters, reading through it, and making any tweaks that you want to. Let me know if there's anything I missed, or if you're just like, no, Josh, you're wrong. Flea Mortals is absolutely the superior book.